Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Understanding Recovery Podcast. Today, Drew and I will have a conversation about the story of three friends. Now, if you see the Tao of Understanding, the U is normally lowercase. I didn't just make a mistake. I did that for a reason, because I have to remember that it's not about my understanding. My understanding is the least important part of this thing, because if I'm not right-sized about what I think I know, I will get in my way, which happens often, and was the reason when I came into AA, I thought I had recovery figured out. I thought I could see the steps. I could work them in an afternoon, and I'd be sober. I was a lot smarter than the folks I met in the room, so of course I could do a much better, quicker, faster, easier job than they could. The way I approached everything, but it did not work with sobriety. That's why I love studying the Tao so much, is because it's got a lot of those same nuances that I found in recovery, and it just supports what I found in recovery. Doesn't conflict with it, nor does it conflict with the Christianity that I was raised with, or that Christian beliefs that I hold today. I think the big change with that for me is I've become more accepting of others in other ways, rather than thinking I've got it figured out, my way's the only way kind of thing. All right, our benefit I want to talk about today, I've made a list so I could make sure and hit all these for you. I don't mention it often, but I recorded about 400. I have about 400 contemplative meditations that I recorded at the first of the pandemic. It's in an app called Sober Meditations. It's a free app, Google and Apple. Actually, the picture on the front of the app I took at Flagler Beach in Florida. Lots of meditations there. I've got 9 meditations for each step too. So let's say I use this with sponsees. Let's say we're working the third step. I ask them to listen to all the 10-minute meditations for the third step. There's 9 total. And then we'll talk about the step. And each of those meditations have one little thought that's different. Like for the first step, why is the first word of the first step we? I'll talk about that. And then all the other little nuances that I found while working the steps and working them with other people. Then I have with sponsees, and then I have a number of other meditations there. And if you'll notice, if you listen to those, my ideas of the higher power have evolved since that time. That was 5 years ago. And I think if your thoughts and ideas about the higher power aren't evolving, then I would rethink what I'm doing and see if I'm not stuck in some way. That's the one thing for me that constantly changes, are my thoughts about the higher power is always changing. And it's just gathering more around the present moment, actually, or the ever-present moment, as God told Noah in Deuteronomy when he asked, who should I say sent me? He says, tell him the ever-present moment sent you. I thought I was getting away from my Christianity, Drew, when I was just coming back to it, is all I was doing. I was making the circle. All right. Our story today, three friends. Drew, will you read this through for us? And then for anyone that doesn't know, this is from Thomas Merton's book, The Chuang Tzu, his interpretation of Chuang Tzu's teachings. This is pages 54 and 55.
Yeah, got it pulled up. There were 3 friends discussing life. One said, can men live together and know nothing of it? Work together and produce nothing? Can they fly around in space and forget to exist world without end? The 3 friends looked at each other and burst out laughing. They had no explanation. Thus they were better friends than before. Then one friend died. Confucius sent a disciple to help the other 2 chant his obsequies. The disciple found that one friend had composed a song. While the other played a lute, they sang, "Hey, Sung-Hu, where'd you go? Hey, Sung-Hu, where'd you go? You have gone where you really were, and we are here. Damn it, we are here." Then the disciple of Confucius burst in on them and explained, I'm sorry. Then the disciple of Confucius burst in on them and exclaimed, "May I inquire where you found this in the rubrics for obsequies, this frivolous caroling in the presence of the departed?" The two friends looked at each other and laughed. "Poor fellow," they said, "he doesn't know the new liturgy."
Thank you, Drew. Okay, so we have three friends. One of the three, this is while they were all living, he had three questions for the other two. Discussing life. This is about life. One, can men live together and know nothing of life? Two, can they work together and produce nothing? Three, can they fly around in space and forget to exist, world without end? The three friends looked at each other and burst out laughing. They had no explanation, but yet they were better friends than before. Because if you look at the three questions, they're all pointing, I think, Drew, to the Tao, all pointing to that place of effortless existence where we can sit at rest. There's nothing to gain, nothing to lose. Like I'm floating down a river. I heard it, I think it was Course in Miracles. They were talking about the course of the flow of life. I never thought about it having a course. And then I thought about, all we study may be about being able to float in the current of that river, not with our feet down dragging, trying to slow down, nor over on the bank with a shovel trying to dig the bank out to change the direction it's going, or paddling trying to go faster than the river, or the opposite, not only our feet down, but any way we can to stop and resist the flow itself. So that first question, can men live together and know nothing of it? Can men live together and know nothing of life? In other words, not figure life out. Can they work together? And I think they're producing because they're working, but it's producing in a way of maybe of gaining riches or with some agenda, some far out goals to attain. That I think that's the kind of producing they're talking about.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the third one, he gets a little esoterical here. Can they fly around and forget to exist, world without end? Can they just enjoy themselves in the moment? I think maybe. What do you think, Drew? Anything to add to that?
No, we have the same thoughts about those. Can men live together and not know? Can men live together and know nothing of life? Yeah, I think that just speaks to being in the present moment and not trying to analyze it. Um, there's nothing wrong with sitting together with friends and talking about philosophy or anything, but there's nothing wrong with not doing that as well. You can just be with each other and enjoy each other's company and not try to think too much about it, and thinking too much about it, analyzing it, just takes you out of the moment.
You
And
know,
yeah,
also, I didn't interrupt you, but
Mhm.
these three questions seem to cover everything. The first
Yeah,
is living together in a relationship, I think. The second one is work. And the third is how you spend your time. Maybe. I think it's encompassing all of life through those three questions.
Mhm. Yeah, that's how I saw all of them. Yeah, the working together and producing nothing. I had the same thought as you. It's not. It is wu wei. It's not doing anything. It's just not forming an LLC or trying to market something that you're all making together.
Or
If that's what happens, that's what happens. But
it could be too not using excessive effort to produce. conniving and hustling and
hmm
over excessive effort to try to make something happen that's not happening, or the
Yeah,
push.
and not making money from your time together your number one priority.
Okay. Yeah. And then the last one's the spending time. Can we enjoy our time with friends and family? They're all aspects of Wu Wei, I think.
Mhm.
A lot of people have different thoughts on that. Wu Wei would be effortless effort. It would be effort without selfish effort attached to it. Doesn't mean you do nothing. Doesn't mean you lay on the couch and watch Big Valley reruns all day. That's not what it's talking about. I take this to mean our effort is coming from more of a place of selflessness, like he's describing here. And it can even be selfless in regards to ourself as the object. In other words, I'm not trying to achieve something for myself, but something doesn't have to be just pointed at someone else.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, like cleaning the house can be done to try to impress somebody, or it can be done just for the sake of cleaning the house and having a more healthy environment and putting things in places where they'll be easier to find later. Why are you doing it? Are you doing it for show, to try to meet somebody's expectations, to try to impress somebody, or are you doing it because you are really hard on yourself if you don't do it? You're trying to do it to get out of feeling guilty, or are you doing it just for the benefit of uh, yourself and everybody who visits?
Yeah, a lot of times that effort looks the same on the outside, but what's going on inside with that?
Yeah.
Do I exercise because I want to stay as attractive as I can, which nothing wrong with that, but I found that with time, if I exercise because I want to be here for the ones I love and I want to take care of my body and I start forming a love for myself that I did not have before, that's a whole different deal.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've seen it in your sobriety groups over the years with the reasons why people stop drinking. Is it because just a court makes them, or they're going to get tested or something, or a partner says that they're going to leave them if they don't stop drinking? Or is it internally motivated by, like what you said, wanting to just be healthier mentally, physically, emotionally, be more present for your friends and loved ones? I'd assume there's more success with the people who have the intrinsic motivation rather than just the extrinsic motivation.
I don't know many who get sober with just those external motivations.
hmm
I don't. It may start out with those things. Like I know of people who've come to meetings, get a paper signed, and when their 30 days were up, or ever how long they had to get a paper signed, they stayed. And it had grown on them during that time. They first came because they had to. Was it? They came because they have to. Now they come because they want to. It's that moving from having to wanting.
Yeah, I've seen that with people who stop because of some external factor, and then while they're a month or so sober, they realize, hey, I feel better. I'm sleeping better. I'm eating better. I'm getting more things done on my to-do lists. I'm less impulsive. I'm less selfish. I'm kinder. I just really like the person I am. And then they continue it. Yeah, you're right. You can get led in, you can get dragged,
Yes.
dragged kicking and screaming into it. But it, long term, I think that internal recognition has to be there.
And look at what comes after that. They had no explanation as to why it was this way. They laughed and said, "We don't know why. We don't have a clue." He didn't try to come up with an explanation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That just reiterates the questions, the answer to the questions. Look at the attitude of this disciple of Confucius has. Okay, one of the friends died, and Confucius sent a disciple to help the other two with their chants and their songs. I guess the funeral chant, I guess would be.
Yeah, that's what I assumed.
So he came to help them with the correct funeral chants. So the Confucius disciple found that one friend had composed a song, while the other two played a lute, while the other played a lute. So you got the disciple listening to the two friends that are remaining. One wrote the song and the other played the lute. And the song went, "Hey, Sung Hugh, where'd you go? Hey, Sung Hugh, where'd you go? You have gone you have gone where you really were. And we are here. Damn it. We are here." I heard my Zen teacher ask, "What happened? Where do you go after death?" He says, "Probably where you were before you were born."
Mm-hmm.
In other words, he went nowhere. He was already there. And they're saying that they're still here, but they know in reality it's all one, and they're just missing their friend. Of Course in Miracles says that we're all in heaven. This is how they look at it. We're all in heaven. We never left, and that all of this world is just an illusion. And that would fit with what they're saying here. He said, "You never left. You just went back to where you were the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not consciously there with you." Really does talk to that oneness of things.
We are the ones who are not one with everything right now.
And this really upset the Confucius disciple. Because if you remember, Confucius' teachings are all about order,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament. You do these things, you honor your parents, you'll be blessed, all those kind of things. And so they had the correct songs to sing at the funeral. So he was sent to make sure probably two things. One, was just to help them because maybe Confucius thought they didn't know what they needed to. So they're singing him to help with that. I don't know. Could be all kinds of things inferred with that. But we do know that it says Confucius' disciple burst in on them and exclaimed. So he was upset. They were singing this song that was not a Confucius approved funeral song. And he said, "May I inquire where you found this song? Where did you find it?" As if you're not supposed to make up your songs. That's not the way it's done. This frivolous caroling in the presence of the departed? How disrespectful can you be? What did the friends do? They didn't get upset, didn't get pissed at the disciple of Confucius. They just laughed and said, "Poor fellow, he doesn't know the new liturgy." They made a joke out of it. In other words, he didn't know how to be led of the Spirit. He was not asking the three questions.
Mm-hmm.
I got to know. I can't just enjoy myself and be. I've got to be doing. Hmm.
And death is one of the most personal aspects of life. Whenever you lose somebody, your relationship with them really affects how you grieve, if you grieve, when you grieve, how you express it, if you express it. And it's not just your relationship with the person that informs that, but your relationship with death as well. Your personal beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, your past experiences. So there are just so many factors that go into how you deal with someone dying. For quite a while, I thought it was, oh, I just don't like it when people judge others for how they grieve,
Mhm.
because It's extremely personal as long as you're not hurting somebody. But if you're happy at a funeral, there could be a million reasons for it. If you're just really distraught for weeks or months on end, there's a reason for it. I just think how you deal with death is just such a personal thing that nobody should come in and say, this is how you should be dealing with your friend's death right now. This is what you need to be singing. These are the rituals you need to be doing. Like the friend said, this disciple of Confucius doesn't know the new liturgy. He doesn't know that as of this moment, the songs Confucius wants to be sung aren't really appropriate for this moment. That's not what they're going to be doing.
Yeah, and it could be too that they had the best intentions at heart. Singing his Confucius sending his disciple,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how the funeral's normally done. So he was coming to help. So it could be all purely from a good motive. And, something that you reminded me of, Drew, when you said that, these guys have learned, the friends have learned to grieve from the heart. That's heartfelt words. And that's one thing we learn with grief is that we have to let that grief go. We have to allow ourselves to grieve. And, just singing the appropriate song is not necessarily grief.
And I'd say the opposite is true as well, is not forcing yourself to grieve if you're not feeling it at the moment. It may be something that comes on later. Faking your way into grieving, that just might not be appropriate in the moment.
Yeah. It looks like the friends were in much more tune spiritually than what the disciple was. But regardless of where you're at, you've got to let that grief happen when it comes. You can't hold that in. You can't
Mm-hmm.
suppress your grief. And I know from personal experience, sometimes it can be years later.
Mm-hmm.
You just have a good cry about whatever it is. Something will come on TV or something will remind you of someone that's passed, and you just take some time. And I found that those waves of grief just get smaller and smaller over time if I don't resist them.
Mm-hmm.
It could be things that happen someone who passed 20 years ago. Doesn't matter. Time's irrelevant. How many times have we held on to an anger or resentment for 20 years? That's easy to do. So, of course, we could hold on to grief for that long, or it could allow that kind of time for that grief to work itself out. Hey, Drew, there's a book I want to mention. It's called The Grief Handbook. And one of the authors of this book was actually a member of AA, died sober with 40 years. So it's got some aspects of, you'll see from like working the steps, fourth, fifth step kind of stuff, is the way he approaches grief. And there are also counselors I know around the US that actually put the book into practice. And my Zen teacher actually took me through the book for when my son passed. So it's called the Grief Handbook. Actually, the Grief Recovery Handbook. You can buy them on Amazon anywhere. A guide through the worst days of your life. I would highly suggest some of the tools in the book. It's very helpful to me when my son passed a few years ago. One thing I noticed with these three friends, their response to anything seemed to be laughter, not stress, not
Mm-hmm.
worry. They didn't try to come up with an explanation. I remember the first time my father told me he didn't know something. I was like 18, 19 years old. I said, wait, you don't know? So what am I going to do? They had no explanation. They just laughed at it. Said, we don't know. And they were better friends because they didn't have, it wasn't about knowing. It was about relationship. It wasn't anything to earn. You weren't gaining brownie points. You were just learning to live without all those attachments that we place on life. So they even took that unattachment into the funeral. They spoke from the heart. And when the disciple got on to them about that, they just laughed at him and said that he hasn't learned the new song yet. In other words, let him flounder. He'll figure it out eventually. They didn't try to teach him the new song. There wasn't a new song to teach, right? Because it was a heartfelt song. It came from their heart. It's really our same approach to life. They just had lived experience with the friends. The new guy wanted to teach them what they should do and what they should not do. They were just living from that place of intuitive knowing, allowing the grief to arise naturally. Drew, you have anything to add to that? Any comments to?
Oh, what this reminded me of 2 summers ago, lifelong friend of mine, his 21-year-old daughter died in a car accident, and they had the funeral at a Catholic university in their, I don't know what you'd call the room, it was a sanctuary. And it was a Catholic funeral. I had never been to a Catholic funeral before. And it was just full of the rites and readings and repetition, just so much of this tradition and doing these steps in the Catholic liturgy, following this order, doing these things 10 times, 20 times, I don't know how many times. And it was really interesting. I really enjoyed it. There was definitely a meditative aspect to it, just repeating the same things over and over. Your mind gets off of thinking about other stuff and just clears out, and you're just repeating these things. It's really interesting. But the part that I remembered the most and that affected me the most was her best friend gave a eulogy, and it didn't follow any sort of Catholic script. It didn't follow any sort of, you have to say these things, you have to do things in this order. It was just from her heart, and it was excellent. I want to be friends with her just so she can give my eulogy. It was fantastic. It was very personal. It was funny. She told some funny stories. She talked about her feelings, her emotions. Very personal. Just it was excellent. And that's what I remembered the most, and that's what affected me the most was her speaking from her heart. The rituals, those were cool in their own way, but the funeral wouldn't have meant nearly as much without that personal aspect to it. You know, if I could have only been there for one of those two parts of it, the rituals or the personal eulogy, I much rather would have heard the eulogy.
It's really talking about living from the heart,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's the funeral or the friends talking about life. Yeah, living from the heart, I think is what this is talking about. Could be. We got another funeral next week, Drew. Got 2 funerals in a row. Next week, it's Lao Tzu's wake. They come at it from a little different perspective. More of this, someone misinterpreting what's going on. Couldn't this, let's take it out.
Yeah, and this is.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, just gonna say this is hitting a little close to home for me right now because my wife's dad died a week ago, and even though he lived close to us, they had really zero relationship for a bunch of reasons. And I I haven't seen a lot of it yet, but it sounds like some people are telling her how she should be grieving and what she should be doing. And she has emotions about his death, but she's not wailing. She's not, and his death was unexpected. It was it was very quick and sudden, and we had no idea that it was going to happen. And she's not outwardly acting like how most people would be acting with the death of a parent coming out of nowhere. And that's getting into my life a little bit because her extended family is going to have a little cookout in his honor in a couple of weekends. And I already had a meditation retreat planned for that weekend. And my wife invited my parents to go to the cookout. I talked to my mom last night and she asked if I was going. And I said, no, I've actually got this meditation retreat to go to. And she didn't say it, but I could hear it in her voice. She was rather judgmental and disappointed in me for continuing to go to the meditation retreat instead of being there for my grieving wife. But she's not, we talked about it. I told her I'll cancel it. I'll not go if you want me to be there with you. And she said, no, you're much happier when you come back from those meditation retreats. I would much rather you go to that. I know you've been looking forward to it. This is just going to be a little 2-hour cookout. I'm going to be totally fine. You don't need to be there. You don't need to be a shoulder for me to cry on or support me, keep me from dying or anything. My mom's not seeing it that way. So my wife may reach out to my mom and say, hey, I'm totally fine. I want Drew to go. We talked about that. So yeah, this story of kind of assuming how somebody should be dealing with death. I've gone through that in the last 24 hours. So interesting timing.
Also, Drew, this could just be how also we could take a step back from the story. We have death and new life in our life all the time. We have births and deaths all the time. If it's a business, if it's a car you love, it could be anything. And how do we approach those things? I can relate it to a business myself. For me specifically, where I've had issues with rental houses, where I've had pride and ego with some of those that I would just absolutely refuse to sell. And I placed all these expectations that were the opposite of these three questions on that. And when it was time for it to pass and me sell, I did not want to do it. And I fought it tooth and nail. There's an aspect of how we deal with those things in our life too that we could apply here. Am I approaching whatever the situation is from a place of acceptance? Am I allowing it as it comes, as it goes, just allowing it and letting go the way I feel I should, doing what I feel is right. And in that way, and staying in this place of neutrality that we talk about in recovery, where we stop fighting anything and anyone, even alcohol. The friends were in that place of neutrality. They were accepting what was happening and dealing with it. And in our own life, can we do the same thing?
Can I get out of my own way?
Yes. Or am I stuck to whatever the situation is, how it's supposed to be handled, and doing it exactly the way that either you're told to do it or that your friends think you should, or whatever the case? It could apply to anything. The times I've been in a situation and get all this advice on how to handle it, and it just didn't feel right. And I would maybe do it my way or do it more of I don't know, sit with whatever it is and get more of an insight on how to handle it. That happens a lot. And sometimes someone will come along and I said, that's what I need to do.
And sometimes I'll go through the exercise of if a friend were to come up to me and say they had a problem, the problem that I'm dealing with, what advice would I give to them? And I'm sure with your rental house example, if a friend had that issue with the rental houses, the advice you'd give them was not what you did yourself in that situation. What it sounds like.
What I found I did for a long time was tied my value of myself to all the rental houses I owned. I didn't own a bunch. There was like 10. I mean, it wasn't like some friends of mine that own hundreds. So it wasn't that much. But I had such value of myself tied to that I just held on much longer than what I needed to sell them because I just wouldn't. So that kind of as an element of this I'm thinking about, and how we overvalue all kinds of things in our life. We put all these expectations on them. We're not in a place of peace, living from the heart, enjoying life in the middle of these situations. Am I stressing over these things? Am I worrying over all this stuff that I can't change in the moment? Am I not feeling and grieving from the heart? Am I instead just doing the platitudes that I'm supposed to? And there's grief a lot of times with things that aren't about death. Grieve about
Losing.
relationships,
Uh-huh.
about jobs. You lose a job. Oh man,
Yeah.
there's grief there.
If your house were to burn down.
Sure. Your dog die. In
Mm-hmm.
your case, cat. Y'all grieve over with cats die, don't you? You actually love your cat.
Oh, of course.
Okay, just making sure. I've never loved a cat.
Yeah.
For me, that's a little that's not mine. But yeah, I was just messing with you. Yeah, that's the thing. We think we've got life so figured out that in the past, and I still have difficulty approaching anything with a laugh and an I don't know. Wow. It was supposed to be the opposite. And if I didn't know now, I could just go to Chat GPT and I'll get an answer real quick.
Mhm.
So is it about me figuring it out, or is it about me being at a place of peace in these situations? And intuitively, I can hear the right thing to do.
My parents and I grieved recently because they've lived in their house for 40 years. And we moved into it when I was like 8. And in the backyard was a giant oak tree, just huge oak tree. We had a swing hanging from it, and it provided a ton of shade, which Texas summers, that's the best gift you can get from anything is some shade. It was home for all these birds, and there was a bird feeder hanging from it. It was just fantastic oak tree, but it got infected, and they had to cut it down a couple months ago. And we shed tears for that tree. It was just a tree, but it was really meaningful to all of us, and it was the only one out there. So yeah, you're right. It can be anything.
You got to be suffering with that, Drew.
Yeah. But it has led us to branch out and try some new places, try to find our next favorite Tex-Mex place. And we've invited some neighbors to join us on our quest for our new favorite Tex-Mex place. It's been a positive. I don't think my wife would agree that it's been a positive.
Anything else to add, Drew? It's been a good conversation today. Thank you.
Yeah, no, very timely conversation for me personally.
Good. It's been a good conversation for me as well. If I don't chat with you, you have a good week and hope to see you next week. Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google Recovery calendars, Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.